Is my face dark?
Nice.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, everybody. My name is Adam Toefy. I'm going to be doing the class of today on Futuwa, Islamic chivalry. And so this is the first class, alhamdulillah, that we're having at CPUT Bellville. And it's lovely to have it just before the Ramadan, before the holy month of Ramadan, where we are able to actually, be in a situation of a moment of excelling ourselves, or causing ourselves to excel, perfecting our characters, working on that process of cleansing the soul, cleansing the heart. And so Futuwa, I feel like this is like this topic and this class is coming at the right time, where we are engaging with or preparing ourselves to go through this experience, and with the cognizance, with the understanding that ultimately we want to be in a fresh state when we meet our Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, so on the screen here we can see that we've got Islamic chivalry, Futuwa meaning Islamic chivalry. And so I will be taking you guys through this concept. It's based off of a book by Imam Dawood Walid called Futuwa, and he explains it as it's a masculine, Islamic masculine chivalry, and yet we show that actually it's for both men and women to learn this type of spiritual excellence, right? So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, we'll go into the first slide, where we deal with what is Futuwa exactly, right? So the term, as I explained now, is translated as Islamic masculine chivalry, and it identifies an inward code of honor or an inward code of excellence, which is exemplified outwardly. So it's a coherence between your inward self and your outward actions, right? It is commonly associated with the term fata within pre-Islamic Arabic poetry, which relates to the chivalric young man that is so honored, as the backbone and the underlying, the foundational pillar holding up the chaotic Bedouin society that was at that time. If we look at pre-Islam Islamic Arabia, you find that you have these clans, and they are all nomadic peoples moving around. And so the way that the structures are, the warrior code, those who are able to, that are strong fighting men, are idealized as they can maintain the strength of the clan, and so that causes some kind of stability, right, in the Bedouin society, and so that just gives us a little bit more of a look, gives us a little bit more of a taste of what exactly Futuwa is not just about, but what it offers, right? It's Islam's method of offering a solution to the current, chaotic climate we find ourselves in, with everybody being confused of what really is and what isn't. Everybody's searching for that stabilizing factor. Futuwa is the stabilizing factor that has been the way throughout Islamic history, when you start off, and so we'll go through that a little bit more. Okay, so the term Futuwa is also associated, and we spoke about it at the beginning with the original slide, was that Futuwa is also associated, whenever you Google it, whenever you search for it, whenever you look up this term, it's associated with spirituality, tasawwuf, right? And you find in Imam Dawood Walid's book, he talks about how when Futuwa is institutionalized in the Islamic world, it is within these groups of Sufis that are under a sheikh, and they have a way of, they've got a code that they must follow, and it is very much structured, right? Because the opposite, the antithesis to chaos, is structure. And so there's a structural element, there's an element of structure in in the concept of futua. It is, and you can see here, right, it's quite difficult to actually encapsulate this one word or this concept within a direct translation, right? We say Islamic masculine chivalry, but like chivalry in itself is a concept that must be gone into, you know, what does it mean? And so that just gives us an understanding there. So in essence, right, and this is just a slight attempt, right, on my part to encapsulate what it means, so what I see it as, you know, in essence, futua is a code of excellence, right? Spiritual excellence. It's also the excellence in your action, excellence in your belief. So it's an holistic excellence, right? That's operationalized in society by those. There's a mistake there, but by those who are seeking God. That the goal of the fatah, of the true the true fatah is the one who is seeking God, right? We'll see this in the examples that's given throughout Islam, but that's the goal, right? That's why I thought that this would be so perfect for Ramadan. Because that's why I thought, you know, couldn't come at a better time. Allah knows best that He put it at this time that we're talking about futua, because it is a way of seeking Allah in your behavior, in all of these things, and it's in a way of stabilizing society, right? So because that's where it all comes down to, is God, right? So if we go to the next slide, right? So continuing of what is futua, right? We find that it's codified in Imam Dawud's book. He starts off the explanation of futua with the speech, right, in his forward of Utbah ibn Ghazwan, one of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And this man is a great man. He's one of the, and he's going to explain to us in this short piece of his speech that we're going to be looking at. But you must understand that this wasn't just an ordinary person. This was obviously one of the companions, but he was also someone that was extremely fervent in the path of Allah, right? So if we go into his speech, we see that. And he says, I was the seventh of 7 people to accept Islam, which means that he was the 7th person to accept Islam with the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And he explains that they had no food except for the leaves of trees which cause sores to develop around our mouths. And I discovered a mantle and took it, splitting it between myself and Sa'ad bin Malik. Right? So if we stop there, just in that short part of that speech, he's giving us so much profound, you know, wisdoms. Right? Utbah ibn Ghazwan, where he says that, you know, we were struggling. We hear that a lot, you know, in terms of when we talk about the history of Islam and what Rasulullah and the Muslims went through, that they were persecuted, but that sometimes just goes over our heads, man, because we talk about it so often. But he's explaining the difficulty that the Muslims went through. We don't actually conceive of it, really. You know, if you go into it, you find that, I mean, he's talking about that they didn't have food early on. They were being persecuted and oppressed to such an extent where they couldn't purchase and nobody could sell to them. And so they had to eat the leaves off of trees, and that caused sores to develop around their mouths. That's horrible. Nobody wants to eat leaves of trees. Nobody wants this. And yet they were doing it without complaint. He's explaining this not as a complaint. He's saying that this is what we did, and we would do it again. We would do it continuously. It's not a matter of what we want. We would give our lives. We would be in discomfort. It's not a question of avoiding discomfort, because we don't, right? And so he's explaining this, that, you know, and then he talks about discovering a mantle, like a, you know, it's a covering, some kind of a cloak, and splitting it between himself and Sa'ad bin Malik, another companion of Rasulullah sallallahu, because they were cast out of Makkah, right? And so they were in a position where they were exposed to the elements. They were completely exposed without a roof over their heads. And so they, for a long period of time. And so that again, he said, and then he's still sharing it with his brother in Islam, regardless of you, like that's you exposed to the elements, you are suffering, you're struggling, and you can explain to yourself, look, if I find this thing, then I'm going to use it to help myself. But he said, no, I'll give less to myself. I will cause myself to be in a little bit more discomfort so that my brother can not be in complete discomfort. He can still have something. Right? We don't realize that this is the level that these people were suffering. Right? Later on, we hear about the stories of after the migration to Medina, after the Hijrah. Then we hear of Muslims that then escape Mecca and reach Medina. And when they reach, one of the companions, he reaches Medina, and Sayyidina Umar says when he held the man, he could feel the scars through his shirt. Right? He could feel the scars, that it was deep enough that he could even put his fingers inside the scars because of how they were torturing the Muslims. This is the people that carried our religion forward. This is the people that were the foundation of our religion, right? That spread the message of Islam, that caused Islam to spread so far and so wide. Right? And then, and then we go into, and then he says, there's none from the 7 of us, those first 7, except that he is now leader of a city. And you will experience firsthand the rulers after us. And so that is from the Shama'il Muhammadiyah of Imam Tirmidhi, that's quoted out of Imam Dawud Ali's book Futuha, right? And so there gives us he gives us another statement and then a warning, right? Imam Dawud Ali highlights this, that this second part of the sentence is a warning, because he's saying there's none from the 7 of us except there is now a leader. So that this difficulty, this ability, or this, let's say ability to go through, or this just desire to come out the other end, right? That they were unfettered, unbothered by suffering and difficulty. That's what prepared them. That struggle prepared them to be leaders, right? They were leaders of different cities. I mean, Utbah ibn Ghazwan, he was an incredible military leader in the early expansion of Islam, who defeated the Persians, he was one of the key figures that was fighting against the Persian Empire, when Islam was still seen as some religion in the backdrop of society, like the backdrop of the world, in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere, that was coming up. There was no power. Rasulullah sent messengers out to the empires that were surrounding the Muslim world and calling them to Islam, sent it to the Romans, sent it to the rulers of Egypt at the time, sent it to the Persians and others, and called them to Islam, and they rejected it. They rejected it. There's a famous, or there's a pretty well-known movie called The Message, where that's portrayed right at the beginning, right? Where the messenger comes to the Persian emperor, and the emperor insults the messenger, not the Prophet ﷺ, but the messenger of the Prophet ﷺ, who's coming with this call, and rips it up and chases him away. In other accounts, they say that they actually killed that messenger. And so they were willing to go into that disastrous or that dangerous realm, or that dangerous area, but they were unfazed by it. And then Utbah ibn Ghazwan, he leads soldiers against the Persians, against an empire that had been standing for centuries, right? That had been at war with the Romans, that had resisted, that had been a back and forth with the Romans. And he leads the Muslims, a contingent of the Muslim army, into Sasanian territory, and they actually take over, right? And I mean, this is the person that we're dealing with, the people that are like really just not charmed or not distracted or not, deterred by overwhelming numbers, not deterred by disaster that, like, looks completely bleak. Like just the environment around you right now is struggling. It looks dark around you. And they saw the light. They saw that you need to struggle towards that light. Right? And so then he gives the warning, and you will experience firsthand the rulers after us. And that is a crazy warning, because he's saying that, what's happening now is you're going to see that those who come off us didn't go through all of this. They didn't struggle like we struggled. They didn't go through this kind of process of forming the character. And so you're going to see what happens when they are given power. Right, and we see that with the history of Islam, the darkness that accompanies the end of Rasulullah's life, and the darkness that follows. Right, it's an intense part of our history. So, yeah, right. So as I said, they noted that he's explaining the harsh conditions they had to struggle through with limited food and clothing for warmth in the cold desert nights. Yet from that struggle was born men who could lead. I mean, if we look at, Imam Dawud Walid does an incredible comparison. He says, look at today, right? How we've had this tradition of people that struggled, right? That really, if we want to look at the South African context, right? There was a struggle here, and it was a harsh struggle. People died, gave up their lives, right? And then we see what comes out after that, the corruption that our country is faced with. Right? It's an incredible thing to see, to first of all, to just hear this, but then to see it happening in our day-to-day. And then we say, what do we need? What is the answer? Right? We need strong people. We need, and it's not just physical strength, though physical strength matters. But we'll see later how strength has many different categories, many different understandings of the word, the term strength, right? Okay, so this is just to show you, right, the empire that we are talking about. This year, how much time do I have left actually? Okay, about 15 minutes hopefully. Let's see. Okay, so this year we are looking at the world just before Islam, right? Rasulullah is born in the area here where it says the Quraysh, right? Can I get a pointer? Is there a way for me to get a pointer? Okay, so it's not going to work right now. But so you got the Quraysh here, which is Makkah, right? And it's slightly to the north of Makkah is Medina. But in that small part of the world, that remote part of the world, it's surrounded by, you've got the Persians with their vassals, all right? You've got the Byzantine Empire that's still controlling Egypt as well, all right? And you've got these tribes around it, like the Ghazanids and the Lakhmids, which are tribes that were used by the Romans and the Persians to fight one another, all right? And then you've got the tribes further into Africa, which is Axum, the kingdom of Axum, which also is known as Abyssinia, right, where the Muslims, the first hijrah goes to, right? So there's this incredible fight. You can see how huge these empires are, this battle that's going on. And amidst this battle, in some remote part of it, so close enough to know what's going on, but far enough that it's not, that these empires are not worried or concerned about it, right? Islam is being born. And so the Muslims then take Islam from this remote, the early Muslims take Islam at the lead of Muhammad Sallallahu from this remote part of the world and take over these two empires that span across, the European, that span the length, of the European continent and so forth. So, I mean, the Persian Empire never recovers again. There's no Persian Empire after this, right? The Sassanid dynasty falls after standing for hundreds of years. The Byzantine Empire later falls to the Muslims, the Ottomans, right, with Constantinople falling. So yes, so that's just to give you a picture of how we spread, how this message was carried forward on the backs of these strong people. right? So, and it's just to show that we can't just be strong. Am I? Oh, there we go. Okay, so yes, we're talking about Futua from Dawud Walid's book, but it's necessary to go back to the time of Rasulullah, looking at these examples. Who were the examples, right? So in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us examples of of Futua in the being or in the person of Ibrahim alayhi salam, where he is found as a young man, right? He's not even, he's a young man, and he's smashing idols, smashed the idols within the house, and he wasn't afraid of what the people were going to do to him. He's sick and tired of this. He knows what the truth is, and he destroys it. He destroys falsehood, stands against it completely, right? Regardless of what they're going to do. And we know what happens afterwards, that the people then build a fire, and they're now going to cast him into this fire. That they are prepared to kill him in a horrendous way. And yet he's not afraid. Because we know then again, what does he say when Jibreel comes to him as he's being cast into that fire, right? And he says, Allah knows my state, and he's content because he's on the path, right? He's completely content. He's unafraid, and so Allah causes that the fire is cool for you, right? That he doesn't have pain anymore, that he sits and the fire is a place that is relaxing for you. And so we find that is a way for us to understand also the struggles in our own lives. When we are going through whatever difficulty we're going through, everybody goes through difficulty, and we are cognizant of the fact that Allah placed us in this difficulty, and we are content with what Allah has placed for us. And it's a difficult, it's a tough kind of realization to come to, because we see this as a fire blazing all around us, and yet we can be realizing that the reality that is the fire is a garden, and it can be a garden with contentment, with us striving towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We come to that realization that this fire is not a fire. The fire is yet the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's still the creation. And so I'm the slave of the creator. And so I struggle towards the creator against whatever stands in my way. Right? Another is, Dawud Walid quotes this, the story of Sayyidina Maryam alayhi salam, who was confronted, where she's coming with a child, and she's out of wedlock, and she's coming with all of these into this society that is judging her, right? And she stands firmly. Allah commands her, don't speak. And then everybody's confronting her and asking her this, asking her that, and she follows the command of her Lord, right? And so you have these stories within the Quran. I mean, one of the stories that came to mind when I was reading this this part of the book was the story in Surah Yasin, right? Where Allah talks about that we sent to this people a prophet, and then we sent to them two prophets, and both prophets were killed, and so we sent another prophet. And then seeing how his people treat the Nabis, the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a man comes from a remote part of the city, and he like pleads with his people, and he says, follow these people, follow these men, they're coming with truth. And he stands against his people. And we know what happens, because Allah says, after Allah talks about, in Surah Yasin, when Allah says that this man comes and he tells his people to do this, Allah then continues, the next ayah is that he say, now enter to Jannah. Because the people massacred that man, they killed him in a harsh, manner. Right? And so then we look at as well and this is especially when we're looking at the soul, Imam Ali, or Sayyidina Ali, radiallahu anh, is a magnificent example, all right? One of the examples of him, as like just oozing, like just, bleeding futua, is where the year now Rasulullah is ready to leave Makkah and go to Medina. And the Quraysh have concocted this idea that, get a man from each tribe and they will all assassinate Rasulullah together while he sleeps in his bed. Right? And so that nobody can, they share the blame, so nobody can go up against 11 tribes. And so they send them. And Rasulullah is informed of this. And upon hearing it, Sayyidina Ali, a young man, he embraced Islam as a young man as well, one of the earliest converts to Islam. And he says, you know what, I'm going to lay in the bed. Because they say, he says, look, if nobody's there, they're going to see that you're not here, they're going to look for you. So let me lay in the bed. Knowing full well that they can kill him, that they will kill him. They didn't have to pull back the cars. They could have left it there and just stab. Could have killed him. And he was cognizant of that fact. He was conscious of it. And he said, I make that decision. Those who are unafraid to die, those who are unafraid to, the suffering that comes from this life, the struggle, right? They're not turned away by that. In fact, we run towards it, right? Oh my God. So yes, it looks like it's going to be time for Dhuhr in the next couple of minutes, so we will wrap up now, right? But the final example, of course, of futua, of Islamic masculine chivalry, right, would be Rasulullah, right? And we can see this in his character throughout his life. So if we go through Rasulullah, we would find that, for example, he was al-alamin, he was known as truthful, he was known as the trustworthy. That is an exemplary, that is an incredible characteristic of chivalry in Islam. That when you come into contact with anybody, you tell truth, even if it's against you. Every man, woman, every Muslim should uphold that characteristic. That we need to be truthful in every aspect of our lives, right? And our Sheikh, he explains that truthfulness is founded in something. In a man, in the masculine, truthfulness is founded in justice. That justice is founded in truthfulness, right? That you are just. And in the feminine, truthfulness is found in justice, right? And so you find that Rasulullah embodies that. Right? So we'll go through the example of Rasulullah next week. Inshallah, just to explain, we do this class every week, every Thursday, the class of, Islamic masculine chivalry. Right? And it's an important thing. I'm just wrapping up now, actually. So it's great that everybody is here. But just to wrap up, this is the answer. We find we're in a society today where everybody's asking, like, why you can, it's on the YouTube, the MSA YouTube channel, so you must check it out. But why, like, we have this hashtag men are trash, hashtag this, hashtag that. Why are people suffering? Where's the good men in the world, right? We're the ones that are going to carry the justice and carry, truth and carry that strength forward, who's going to stabilize society. And Islam gives that answer. It's futua. It's the chivalry that is established in Rasulullah, that's established in the companions, that are those men that were unafraid to go through struggle, that were unafraid to go through any kind of difficulty, that stood for Allah and completely, right? That's the answer. That's the answer to the chaos that we're surrounded by. Men and women that are chivalrous, that are truly embodying that spiritual and physical, that holistic chivalry, right? So yeah, so that I think is the wrap up. Is anybody want to ask questions quickly? No? No. Alhamdulillah. So I say shukran to everybody that came online, and also everybody here. Alhamdulillah, got a few guys in and some of the sisters. So shukran jazilan for the talk. You're not coming to listen to the talk, and inshallah next week again we carry on with this beautiful concept of futuwah. So much.